Hello everyone, it is me Dan, back again with another installment in my Christopher Nolan review series, and in today's video we are going to be reviewing the concluding chapter in the Dark Knight Trilogy, and probably one of Nolan's most contentious and divisive movies he's released to this day is, of course, The Dark Knight Rises. Now, I have such sweet nostalgia for this film because this was one of the first movies I ever went to the cinema that I was properly excited for. You know, one of them films where you really start to watch behind the scenes stuff for it. You try and squeeze every ounce of information you can about the film before release. You watch all of the trailers. The endgame equivalent for 12-year-old me back in 2012 when I went to watch this film in the cinemas. It was a crazy experience, and I still remember that date very vividly. Removing that nostalgia aside, what do I think of the movie of itself? Well, with that being said, let's get into the review. So the story of The Dark Knight Rises takes place 8 years after the events of the end of The Dark Knight, where Batman took the fall for Harvey Dent. Since then, he has gone into hiding. He's not been seen in all of that time. The Dent Act has since been passed, which has helped to drive crime in Gotham City down to the lowest that has ever been. However, in the midst of this, a mysterious character called Bane rises and threatens to undo all of the work that Batman and Gordon had set up with this lie 8 years prior. Now, of course, this will be a spoiler review. I will mention spoilers about The Dark Knight Rises in this video. I mean, the film is 8 years old. You've had almost a decade to see this movie, and I would be very surprised if people did not know how this movie ended, considering it, again, it was very contentious at the time of its release, especially the ending. So, yeah, if you're one of the few people that hasn't seen The Dark Knight Rises, brace yourself. There will be spoilers, but again, pretty sure most people will have seen this movie. So let's just talk about the positives and the negatives. So to start off with the positives, I have to mention that I do really like this film. And one of the main reasons I like it is the story. I really enjoyed the story of this movie. And people found this disappointing because they were kind of expecting very similar to what we got with The Dark Knight. I personally wasn't. When I walked into this film, I wanted a concluding chapter to this trilogy. I wasn't looking for The Dark Knight 2.0. So when they went with this very radically different storyline, I really appreciated it. I liked how they had this massive time jump, so you really felt the effects of the end of The Dark Knight. This sacrifice that Batman made, it worked, so that when you see it come crumbling down over the events of the film, you really feel something because it actually had a positive effect on the city, even though in of itself it was a lie. And that was something that I really appreciated. It's a very slow film. I think this film has a runtime of about 2 hours and 44 minutes. Like, I think it's Nolan's second longest movie behind Interstellar. And I never felt bored throughout this entire story. I liked the different angles it took. And again, just how very different it was compared to the first two movies, and I have to give it credit to that because it definitely was original. And the theme that they go for in this one, again, was very, very cool because Batman Begins' theme was fear, The Dark Knight's theme was chaos. With this film, it's a combination of war and pain. You really feel those throughout the entire thing. Our main villain, Bane, is someone who feels pain every single day of his life. That's why he has to wear the mask. The war aspect of having the upper class and the lower class of society clashing against each other, the pain that Batman goes through in the movie when he gets his bat broken, watching his city burn, watching its city fall into pieces. Nolan just had such really clear and distinctive themes for all three of his films that just worked so well, and I really liked how they persevere in this one. And again, they just help to really make these movies stand out on their own, but also come together with the fact that they can tell this really consistent and well-written theme throughout the entire film. And this film takes risks. There are genuine risks that this film takes. Again, the fact that it's very much focused on Bruce Wayne and not Batman. This was something, again, that a lot of people complained about because they were saying, oh, Batman's barely on screen. The Dark Knight was the Batman movie. That was the film that challenged Batman's morals and ideologies. With this one, this is clearly about Bruce Wayne. How this 8 years of not doing anything with his life, just slowly rotting away in his mansion, how that has destroyed him as a person, and how the events of The Dark Knight completely changed him for the worse. And this film is about him having to rebuild himself, to climb himself out of that hole that he put himself in. And you could arguably say that he put himself in since he was a kid. It's just such a brilliant way to go about it, and I think it works tremendously well. And it's just a brilliant way to bring this entire series of trilogy full circle, with Bruce really going on this journey of just accepting his fate and not going on this crusade to die, but rather to leave behind a legacy just like his family did. And it only means that when Batman is on screen, it feels even more satisfying because the film does such a great job of building up his character to the point where when you see him in that suit, it's really fucking rewarding, and it really works for me. And again, on other risks you've got here, there's barely any Alfred in this movie. He's only in this film for the first half an hour, and then as soon as he dons the cape and he comes back to the Batcave, Alfred's gone until the end of the film. And again, that was something else that people complained about with this film, but I never was really bothered by it. The first two movies did such a good job of exploring their relationship, but the fact that it took a backseat in this one, for me, I was completely fine with, because I feel like they really did a lot of good work with those two in the first two films. I liked the fact that they were conscious enough to say, okay, let's put Alfred to the side a little bit so we can have Bruce explore his relationship with these other characters. Speaking of new characters, let's get into them, because the biggest two for me, and the two that I enjoyed the most, were of course Bane and Catwoman. Let's get into Bane. A brilliant villain, very much underrated, and I still say this to this day, because coming off the back of the Joker, who's one of the most critically lauded villains in any film ever, you're gonna have yourself a hard task to live up to. And I think Bane was fantastic because he was very much the polar opposite of the Joker. The Joker was this embodiment of chaos, whereas Bane is this big brutish person who you look at and just question, like, how on earth is Batman going to beat him? But not just that, this dude is smart. He's such a clever villain, and I like that they portrayed that side of Bane. He is a proper strategist. He knows what he's doing. He's got the brains to back up his strength, which is something that makes him, as a villain, particularly dangerous, and it makes him really engaging throughout the whole film. Tom Hardy, brilliant in this. I love Tom Hardy in pretty much anything he's in, and then he was tremendous. I mean, the transformation he went to get into this shape for Bane is honestly staggering. And then, of course, Catwoman, or Selena Kyle, because she's never referred to as Catwoman in the film. Really liked her in this movie. Anne Hathaway gets a lot of slack as an actress and just as a person. I really just kind of keep myself outside of all of that, because I actually think the performance she puts in this film is really, really good. I really enjoyed her as Selena. I liked how she played it very differently to how, of course, Michelle Pfeiffer portrayed Catwoman in Batman Returns. And I liked that. Out of comparing the two, I don't know if I really could, because they're very different portrayals of the character. I liked how hers was very much more grounded. The action as well in this film is just as good as it was in The Dark Knight. I really enjoyed it for the most part. There's a few scenes where there's definitely some questionable stunt work. There's one scene that is very well known where there's a rooftop fight scene with Batman and Catwoman, and there is clearly an extra that just falls over without being hit at all. Like, that bit was very questionable. But outside of that, I think the action for the most part is pretty good in this film, and I very much enjoyed it. The favourite sequence easily being the final chase you have for the bomb at the end of the film. Really damn good chase, really well choreographed with the Bat, which, by the way, awesome vehicle. I love the Bat. I remember when I saw it in the promos and I was thinking, I'm not sure how this is going to work in the film, but honestly, the thing looks badass. The CGI used for it is seamless. Like, the CGI in this film is 10 out of 10. You wouldn't really be able to notice it unless you were trying really hard to look out for it. It's so damn good. However, this film is not perfect. There are problems that I do have with The Dark Knight Rises, and I will straight up say this is my least favourite film in the trilogy, and I can definitely say that for a fact. There's just a few problems that I have with this that really don't permeate in the first two films. The main two ones being, I really didn't like some of the plot holes that are in this film. Now, some of them I can ignore, because there's clearly ways you can logically get around it. One of the ones is, how does Bruce get out of the Lazarus pit and then make it back to Gotham in X amount of days? But the way I interpret it is that these scenes where we're going back and forth from Bruce and Gotham are out of sequence. They're not in wholly chronological time. So I think there's a reasonable enough time span for Bruce to get back to Gotham. But then you've got other things such as Bruce escaping from the bomb, and then just a lot of conveniences that happen towards the end of the film where, yes, it definitely starts to pile up to a point where you start to realize, okay, there's a lot of stuff that's very convenient about this. And I wish that this film had had another rewrite just to get those, you know, rough edges of the script out completely. And then the other one would be Talia al Ghul. I really didn't like the reveal of her being the main villain. One, because it felt very obvious to me, and especially because I'd watched Inception before I went to see this film in the cinemas, and so obviously Marion Cotillard played the femme fatale villain in Inception. So when I saw her pop up in here, me and my dad turned to each other and said, yeah, she's probably going to be the main villain for this one, and lo and behold, she was. I think she's good in the film when she's just Miranda Tate, but when she's revealed to be Talia, I just don't really feel like we get enough time with her character to really establish her as Talia al Ghul as being this massive threat. And I will also say as well, she has one of the worst death scenes in any film that I have seen. Like, this is something you would see out of a straight up no budget B movie. It's absolutely horrific. Just kind of the perfect summary as to her as a villain. You know, she comes in at the end out of nowhere, and she just leaves with a bit of a sour taste in your mouth, unfortunately. But outside of those two negatives, I actually do like The Dark Knight Rises. I don't really see why people complain of this being a bad movie. I can see why people would not say it's their favourite, completely agree. I can even see why people would say it's not a great movie. But to say this film is like less than okay or shit, for me, I don't agree with that opinion at all. I think there's still a lot that you can really like about this film. And I personally really enjoyed the hell out of it. And for my final score rating, I'm going to give it the score of an 8.5 out of 10. Like I say, it's definitely my least favourite out of the trilogy, but I still very much enjoy it. It's still a film that I go ahead and watch almost once every year because I always rewatch the trilogy, so I'll always come back and rewatch this one. But I thought this was a very satisfying way to round out the entire Dark Knight trilogy. And I think it's a film that just gets a bit too much hate in my opinion. So if you've not seen this film in a while, definitely give it a rewatch, and I think your opinion might change for the better. So thank you very much for watching my review, of course, of The Dark Knight Rises. We now have one more Christopher Nolan movie to review in this entire series, and I will have reviewed every single Christopher Nolan film, and that is, of course, Interstellar, which I'm very excited to rewatch because it's a film that I believe I put at number 7, my ranking video that I did a couple of years back. So I'm very excited to see if it's going to actually stay there or if it's potentially going to go up, because I've been very intrigued to give it a rewatch. So Interstellar will be the last review of this series, so keep your eyes peeled on the channel for that. I want to thank you very much for watching the video. Make sure you give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I hope to see you all again next time.